second day of the conference this year, and for our distinguished panel on looking forward the next 100 years of XR research. I am Karen Alexander. I'm a member of the Immersive Learning Research Network, and I am also one of the leaders of the iLearn Initiative XR Women, and I'm very proud to be here today to present these speakers to you. I'm going to make some introductions to all four of them now. We are still waiting for Jessica Brilhart to join us. She was having some updating issues, but with luck, she will be here in a moment. So first, I will introduce Katarina Prasilova-Forland, who is a full professor at the Department of Education and Lifelong Learning at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. She's been working with educational virtual worlds and immersive technology since 2002, and she has over 100 publications in the field. She's been involved in developing educational VR simulations for a wide range of stakeholders, from aquaculture industry to the Norwegian Armed Forces. Katarina has founded and is leading innovative immersive technologies for learning, Intel Research Group, and the VR Lab at NTNU. She's an ambassador for Women in Immersive Tech, who will, by the way, be collaborating with our XR Women group on a Speak networking event as part of the conference on June 9th. And she is also leading the VR Lab at NTNU. So she is a board member of XR Norway and a member of several international expert panels. Professor Prasilova-Forland frequently gives public speeches and interviews on immersive technologies for learning and training, and she's currently working on a number of projects on educational applications of immersive technologies in STEM education, climate change awareness, professional training, medicine and therapy, career guidance, collaborative work, emergency management, and other areas. Wow. And yes, I see that Jessica Brilhart has joined us. Hello, Jessica. Glad you were able to get through the update and to be here. Excellent. So I will now introduce you, and after I'm finished introducing all the panelists, then we will start with the questions. I'm really looking forward to hear what the panel has to say today. So Jessica Brilhart is the director of the Mixed Reality Lab at the University of Southern California's Institute for Creative Technologies, and she's the founder of an independent XR studio, Bry Pictures. She's known for her pioneering work in the immersive space and has made a wide range of award-winning experiences and platforms, and has collaborated with Bose, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Elvis Presley Enterprises, the Philharmonia Orchestra in London, Frank Gehry, the Montreal Canadiens, Yo-Yo Ma, Google's Artist and Machine Intelligence Team, and unofficially, the Weather Channel. Her work continues to explore the experiential potential of emergent technologies with the goal of creating emotional, inclusive, and impactful experiences. In 2017, Brilhart was recognized as one of the top 35 young innovators by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and in 2019, she received South by Southwest Festival's Future of Experience Award for her spatial audio platform, Traverse. Most recently, the Advanced Imaging Society awarded her with the Distinguished Leadership Award for innovation in the entertainment industry. So welcome, Jessica. Next, I would like to introduce to my right, Dr. Johanna Parker, who is a computer scientist focusing on game development, research, and education. And she is an active and strong voice at the local indie dev community. Yay. She has lengthy experience in designing, developing, and evaluating games and VR experiences, and she believes in them as tools to support learning, collaboration, and solving real problems. Johanna has started in the industry as a QA tester at EA and still consults with studios in the fields of games user research. In 2011-2012 academic year, she started researching and developing VR experiences at MIT. And at the moment, she is a professor for game development at TU Graz and researches games with a focus on artificial intelligence, human-computer interaction, data analysis, and VR technologies. She was listed on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list of science professionals. And then finally, to my far right, we have Julian, who is a research scientist at Harvard University's Graduate School of Education. His work intersects educational innovation and learner-centered design, focusing on aspects of AR/VR education, makerspaces, software, hardware engineering, and embodied cognition. At Harvard, he's been researching AR for collaborative education in makerspaces and VR for bias and empathy training. He holds a PhD from the Georgia Institute of Technology, focused on developing immersive technologies for K-12 education, and has led XR education research initiatives focused on children and education, while collaborating with organizations such as PBS Kids, MIT, Samsung Research, Qualcomm, and WestEd Research. Wow, this is really an all-star panel, very, very exciting. So I would like to start out asking you all, now that people have got a sense of who you are, what you're working on right now, what you plan to do next, and how you see your work figuring into the future of XR and XR research. Jessica, I know you just arrived, but if you are ready, I'd like to start with you.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Okay. I hope that this continues to work. I've been having internet issues. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot. So I'll just kind of give like a quick kind of, I guess, overview of sort of what's been interesting to me as of late. And I know I did share some slides, I believe. I don't know if you can show those real quick.
I'm sorry, I did not receive those.
Oh, okay. Well,
if you would like to post them in a private message to me in the chat, I can try to put them up on the board.
Okay, yeah, no, I can kind of talk to it. It's okay. Maybe I can show. I'll post it later. But yeah. So basically, a lot of my work tends to sort of see underneath the surface and like kind of what is this language for this new medium that we're approaching, and what are the languages that these new technologies afford us. And by doing so, I think what's been really interesting is thinking a lot about, I think, for our lab especially, we've been looking a lot at fidelity, we've been looking a lot at abstraction, like how much information is really necessary to be able to create an impactful experience or something that relays a message. Also thinking just in terms of, what does the next interface look like? In the age of spatial computing that we're entering, it needs a fundamental shift in the way that we actually interface. So even in this environment, although cool, right? Still hard, it talks back to the real situation where we're all sitting in a room watching someone on stage, which in the real world works because it just works and it's what we're used to. But in the virtual space, and I think some folks at yesterday's panel, they were talking about this as well, which is, we have the capacity to completely reinvent how we interact and are able to communicate this kind of information in the virtual space. So, oh, there it is. Hey, okay. So I guess really quickly, I mean, this is something that's been really fascinating to me. It's like, how much do you actually need to be able to achieve or be able to relay specific information? And while also doing so, like I was looking at it from a more creative standpoint, like this was a Weather Channel experience that I unofficially made that puts all 4 panels of the Weather Channel during the 90s around you, and then it plays Kenny G as you're in it. And it's just a 360 VR experience. But what was fascinating was like from a interest perspective, people were far more interested in this than they were in something like the AccuWeather VR app, which was tons of data being thrown at you, wasn't very well designed. I love AccuWeather. I don't mean this to be a jerk, but it's just an obvious design thing that I noticed. And so from there, just thinking, okay, not only is this more engaging, but it's also a way to optimize information, right? So, you know, something that took me 5 minutes to get into, all I really needed to do in this iLearn virtual campus was to get to the main stage, but I had to wait for 10 minutes for the whole thing to update before I could go to that small little section of the place that I needed to go. So thinking about optimization in that way. I guess next slide. Maybe I can do it. Oh, here we go. Okay. I'll go to the, oh my goodness. There we go. Okay, so looking at this, like, you know, looking at Scott McCloud's work too. So looking at the creative arts as a way of understanding, you know, like personal, how do we perceive ourselves? How do we represent ourselves in the world, which is very important, as we've seen in schools and education, remote or otherwise. Just who are we and how do we represent ourselves? But then also like looking at other ways in which this has been done, whether it's in games, whether it's in VR as we know it now, or immersive as we know it now. So really thinking about, yeah, I guess visual fidelity, audio, you know, other modalities as well to help fill in the blanks and actually let people feel like they're part of the experience, like championing resonance more than the actual assets themselves. And so I think there's a great deal of interesting research to be done there. And I think that's going to lead the way in terms of how we design the next generation interface. So that's what our team's really excited about pursuing.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Now, Katerina, would you like to tell us a little bit more? I'm going to pull up the your slides here, and we would love to hear about what you're working on and what's coming next for you and what you see. How do you see that figuring into the next 100 years of XR research?
Thank you, Karen. So as you could see from my first slide, I enjoy reality as much as XR. And I think that in the future, the power of XR would be to supporting hybrid spaces, either for education, which is my field, or entertainment or travel, where the virtuality merges with supplements or enhances reality, allowing moving between different dimensions and tailoring user experiences according to your needs, combining the better of both worlds. At the moment, unfortunately, the technology doesn't allow us to fully experience travel to East Island, for example. But it's coming there, and I'm really looking forward to kind of when the experiences become so powerful, also in terms of both visual fidelity, haptic feedback, sound, the smell, that it could allow us to travel as much, a lot, without thinking of possible travel restrictions, environmental impact, and so on. And as you can see from my images, I am quite an adventurer, so I really love exploring, having new experiences, and exploring new adventures. And I believe that in the future, XR will allow me to do just that, with all my senses involved, especially going to outer space, which is my childhood dream, but I don't think I will ever be able to realize this dream in reality, well, because I am not that fit and I'm not that young any longer. And as you could see some images from our lab, I am, apart from having really much fun with XR myself, I'm also really engaged with sharing that fun with other people, especially with girls and women. So here you see some of my projects. So as you mentioned, I am Norway's ambassador for Women in Immersive Tech, which is a European non-profit, but we focus on Europe, but we also have a lot of members from, for example, States. And we also often welcome, well, at least we did before COVID. Now we have to think a bit differently, delegations to our lab, especially we had some girl day where high school girl sorry girls from high school come to our lab and explore all the possibilities that XR could offer. And sorry again. And in this way, I try to kind of inspire future leaders of the field, future female leaders to come to our lab to explore the possibilities that this technology could give, and in this way try to shape the field themselves. Now in this slide, you see kind of the variety of our projects. So we are all over the place, from educational solutions for neurosurgeons to applications visualizing climate change, STEM applications, XR applications enabling time travel, waking interest in history. And maybe our most exciting project at the moment is the one we do with the Norwegian Labor and Welfare Administration, where we try to empower young job seekers with VR, allowing them to try out different professions and workspaces in VR in a safe and engaging manner. Something we believe would be even more important now after the pandemic, where a lot of young people are in a vulnerable situation. They maybe drop out of school. They don't believe in their own possibilities of mastering a profession, and where our goal is actually to introduce them to different professions and give them that sense of mastery. So you can see we work in all over the place in a lot of different subjects, but our major focus is learning and training with XR. So all our projects are kind of revolve around that area, and we collaborate with a lot of different subject matter experts. And I think the strength of our lab, and generally I think what the XR field needs right now, is cross-disciplinary collaboration. It's important not only involve people from IT, but people from all different disciplines. So we work typically with people from unemployment offices, from neurosurgeons, from teachers from different disciplines, who tell us what they need, how they need to shape these applications we are developing to provide the best learning effects. And I believe that also this is something we need to take into account when planning the development of the field, to work in a very cross-disciplinary manner, and to find a way where XR can flexibly supplement existing learning spaces, existing approaches. Because as we can see after the pandemic, the situation, especially in education, it's hybrid. It's hybrid. We try to be flexible. We combine use of physical teaching, physical spaces with virtual ones, and people are tired of Zoom. So we want to make XR as a medium to create these fully flexible hybrid spaces that we can kind of merge across this reality virtuality continuum and shape according to the needs of the learners.
Wow, that's fantastic. And I really appreciate the cross-disciplinarity and the variety of applications or areas that are represented by this panel as a whole. It's really exciting to me. So next I'd like to turn to Johanna Perker. What do you have to tell us about what you're currently working on and what's next, and what you see for the future of XR and XR research? I'm not hearing you, Johanna. Could you check your mic, please? You are not muted.
Hello, hello, hello.
There, that's working. Okay, good.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I was using the wrong mic. Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for the kind invitation to this excellent event at this really cool panel. I'm super honored. Yeah, so what are we working at the moment? So my research group is called the Game Lab Graz. So you can find the details at gamelabgraz.com. And we're working on different national and international projects on various game-based projects, but I want to mainly talk about the VR projects, where we are, for instance, involved in the development of a digital twin of circuit board developments, but we are also working, and this is one of my favorite projects, I would say, on immersive learning experiences. But what is most interesting to me is not, I would say, the development of soul learning experiences, but actually we are trying to develop an entire learning management system for virtual reality. So this is something where I find it should be so much more open and accessible to other educators to use more experiences and also to develop more experiences. So I think I can fully agree to the previous panelists, where I can really point out the necessity of interdisciplinary work and also like cross-disciplinary work, and to make it more open and accessible. And that's what we really hope to work on more in the future, because I strongly believe it's on the one hand, it's important that we have more content available for virtuality experiences to make it a sustainable experience. And what I find super interesting, just think about game development, right? So game development a couple of years ago, you had this fancy game engine. You didn't have this fancy game engine you're having now. It was really limited to programmers and expert game developers to make interesting experiences. But all of a sudden, with new tools such as Unity and Unreal, game development became accessible to such a broad range, and also non-developers and non-technicians can develop their own games and game-based experiences. And all of a sudden, the entire field became so much more diverse. And this is what I'm hoping for virtual reality and also augmented reality, even though my heart is for virtual reality. I really hope that we can excite more people from all different fields, artists and philosophers and historians, and to use this medium to come up with own interesting experiences in the future. And this is what we are working on right now, to work on different training scenarios, for instance, for SMEs, that they learn how to use VR and come up with entirely new use cases and showcases. So this is a little bit of an overview, what I am aiming at working on.
Wow, that's really inspiring. Thank you. Yes, and it's the accessibility to enable more people to become creators with these tools and come up with applications and uses that we just might not be able to imagine until we open it up to a broad range of people. Thank you very much for that. Now, Julian, you have some slides, which I will put up here, and we'd love to hear from you about this question of what you're working on, where your work is going, and what this means for the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm honored to be in two physical places, two places at the same time. I'm here in my house, but I'm also here in this virtual world. It's a really interesting experience to be on a panel in two spaces. Hopefully you can all see these animations that are on this slide. So this is just outlining some of the work that I've been doing recently. I work a lot in augmented reality and looking at, so I'm an engineer by heart, so I like tinkering with things and trying to push the edges of the technology so that we can explore how can we bring virtual content into the physical world and what happens when we do that. So these are some of my projects that I've been working on in recent years. On the top left is something that I've done as part of my PhD, where I worked with children and looking at how can we design technologies that fit with a child's development, both physical and cognitive development, in order to teach them something. And then on the other examples are physical objects that have been augmented with virtual information. So all of these things are things that you would encounter in a makerspace. So on the right side, it's videos showing augmented reality interactions with robots. And basically using an interface, designing interfaces that can show you what is going on inside of that robot and how can we take this abstract information that people usually think about when programming robots, and we can make it visual. And how does that change people's collaboration and the way they're thinking about these physical objects? And on the bottom left is a project that I've done on a speaker. So this is a physical speaker, it makes sounds, but in this visualization, you can visualize what the sound waves look like, and you can visualize magnetic fields and electricity by just looking at these objects. So I'm exploring the edges of augmented reality technology to try to figure out what happens in the way we learn about things and the way we collaborate with each other when we can take abstract information and bring it into the real world and tie it to real objects. And I believe the future of this technology is basically we're going to have the internet. Right now, the internet is sort of a separate space with all this information, but in the future, the internet will be tied into the physical world. So everything that's out there as information, it will now be connected to physical spaces and physical objects. And so we're trying to explore how does the future look like when people are learning and looking at the world through those lenses. And I'm going to try to move to the next slide, if I can. Do I just click on the screen? Yeah, hopefully I've switched to the next slide. So these are some of my more current projects. They're kind of juxtaposed. So on the left side, it's people interacting in a virtual space about physical objects. And on the right side is somebody having a very emotional experience that's related to empathy and bias. So on the left side, we're currently building a system that allows people kind of like Zoom, but with being able to interact with 3D physical objects. So you can imagine sitting at your computer, but you're connected into a virtual space that has been 3D scanned. It's a 3D scan of a physical space. So it's actually me interacting with these physical objects, but you can see them virtually and you can look around and you can see there's also a VR person in there. So there's multiple people collaborating around physical objects that are actually physical present in my workspace. And we're trying to see how can we build collaboration tools and also educational experiences so that I can bring in a physical object and somebody who is remote can work with me in order to manipulate or to learn about these physical objects while still being separated, in this case by the pandemic, but in the future, you can still imagine that people will be separated across distances, and these kind of technologies will allow people with different interests and different expertise to connect together and to be able to do things that we would normally not be able to do because we are physically separated from each other. And on the right side, I'm also interested in these notions of empathy and detecting biases through these technologies. And so we have some projects in which, for example, in one of them, you put on a VR headset and you become a child who's in a distressful situation. And we've had people cry in these headsets, and we've had really emotional experiences that elicit really interesting connections between people and experiences they never would have had. So the parallel with these projects is that my main interest is in trying to push these technologies and trying to look at what happens when we bring virtual content and connect it to physical objects. On the left side, it's abstract information and educational, like theoretical information that's about physical objects and bringing into a physical space to learn about the objects on the table. On the right side, it's more of an embodied, and it's connecting a person to a virtual experience. So taking something that's really abstract, like the feeling of being a child, and putting somebody in that body and giving them this visceral experience. And I believe with augmented reality and virtual reality, we can explore these really interesting connections between what happens when these virtual experiences connect our physical bodies into something new that we would have never experienced before, or into seeing the world in a new way that we would have never experienced before. So I'm really excited about these things, and I have some kind of concerns, and I'm happy to chat more in the panel as we get more questions. But I also feel like authoring is something that's really important for us to be working as a field. I feel it's very technically challenging to create these kind of experiences, but hopefully in the future, we'll get more and more people to be able to create it. We also have to be cautious. I think since these experiences are so deeply connecting into our bodies and very visceral, especially with virtual reality, we have to be really cautious about the ethics and designer bias, and we have to be careful about how we design experiences and what we expose people to make sure we're doing something that's really powerful and beneficial for humanity. Yeah, So that's it. Thank you so much. I'm happy to answer more questions as we go along.
Fantastic. Yes, thank you, Julian. These connections that you're making between the material world and our physical bodies and the virtual world, I think, are really important and a really interesting area of exploration. And so I'm sure, based on what you've just said, that you have something to say about challenges. What challenges do we face ahead in XR and XR research? But if you could hold those thoughts for a moment, let's switch over to some of the other panelists and ask them to address that question. Jessica, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that we face in XR and XR research?
Well, I mean, I think, and I mentioned it earlier, I think reality is overrated. I think that for this kind of medium, we do need to really think about, what this technology affords us, right? Like dig into some of the concepts that we've gotten used to over the decades and decades of working in other spaces, right? So even the idea of education, which I personally think, education is fundamentally broken. Just this, I mean, especially recently, we've seen that. I think that, what we need to really start to figure out is in the future that we are entering, how and how do we break away from the traditional modes of teaching and start thinking about what we really need to prepare our students for? Like, what is it that we're really trying to help them to do? And I know that most teachers, at least the good ones, would say that what they really want to do is prepare their kids for the future, and not so much to just, rehash the same old tropes for what the relationship between a teacher and student ought to be, or is taught to be, I guess. And so this idea, like, some kids who don't necessarily respond to sitting still and watching the teacher, but instead maybe looking at things a bit differently or engaging with certain concepts a bit differently. That in itself is something that we can embrace with this new technology, is starting to embrace different perspectives, thinking about context, and essentially making our kids and anyone actually who's involved in, who's being educated on a number of things, helping them to become more adaptive, to the point of, we live in a reality where things are fairly what they are, right? We presume. But the idea that you can go into a virtual space and things could change on the fly, the environment can change in real time. We live in a sea of data. How does that manipulate our environment? How does that create a safer space for us to be and our kids to be and all students to be? I think, these are things we really should be thinking about. And in my mind, these are some of the most important questions. I think there's a lot of research being done in the wrong area, which is like, how do we recreate the classroom in VR? How do we recreate that, trope of a relationship between a teacher and a student in VR? How do we bring reality into VR? And I think reality is, even though I say it's overrated, it's fine how it is. I think that what we can do is really start to enhance the way that we educate, reinvent the systems under which we educate students. And that requires research that's done much more on the content side, much more on the, what is this medium actually good at doing side, than it is about rehashing old content tropes and really focusing on, pushing like something like, and I mean, all due respect to my colleagues here on stage, by the way, this is just opinions that I've had and gripes that I have, but I feel that, stuff like fidelity, although, there are certainly situations where having full fidelity of an environment or of another human being is important. However, I think that for a number of reasons, lowering the fidelity will help us to teach our kids to be more emotionally developed, right? Having more emotional responses, being able to fill in the blanks themselves. Some call that creativity. I call that just being adaptive to all situations. And as we move forward, we start looking at the workforce and how that's evolving as well, thinking about how we can best prepare the next generation for a very different kind of world. Really thinking about how that adaptability is going to be crucial in how they're able to be part of that workforce of the future. So I think these are all, and it's a lot, but it's just thinking that, you know, I feel like the biggest threat to all of this is by focusing on the wrong thing. And so for myself, and I know for a number of my colleagues, and I imagine folks on stage as well, is really getting to the bottom of what we're trying to do here and focusing our research on the stuff that matters most.
Fascinating. Yes, with all the possibilities we have with these technologies, why would we recreate old forms, as you said, such as the classroom as we know it, because there are so many other opportunities available to us. We just need to expand our imaginations. Katerina, what do you have to say about the biggest challenges that we face?
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Jessica. You really made a great point of that we need to revise our thinking. We need to look at more transformative ways of using XR in education. And if it's being used right, I mean, you really can get amazing results. You can make people cry. You can make people really emotional. There's a lot of research of that. But at the same time, we still have some kind of really mundane issues at our that we have to deal with, and this is it has to do with this challenge I mentioned before about the need for XR to support the hybrid spaces, because now we see that all the teaching is becoming more and more hybrid. You have to be flexible, you have to combine physical teaching with online teaching and learning. You have kind of be very flexible. You need to adjust on the go. And so I think the biggest challenge is actually to allowing such a flexible and easy transition between XR and reality, and integration in our everyday practices. And especially if you look at our teachers that have already been overworked from the challenges from the pandemic by adjusting to the new reality, we hardly want to overwork them even more. Why we are thinking of how can we introduce XR into teaching, at least at our university, in the most efficient and seamless way. It's a postdoc project we are having, and there is a number of very kind of down-to-earth practical challenges. It's, for example, ease of use. So typically you need to start educational session in XR. You have a school class at your lab, and then suddenly stuff doesn't work. You have to reset all over. You have to set up. So all those things that kind of prevent you just kind of seamlessly transiting from this physical space of the classroom into the virtual world of XR. About availability of educational content, you need to make the production of tailored XR content as easy as preparing a PowerPoint, as some of my teacher colleagues suggested. So at the moment we are not there. So when we work on our projects, we have to make a team between stakeholders, teachers, and some IT students who kind of develop applications based on their specifications. But ideally, to be really integrated in the existing teaching practices, these apps should be made as easy as creating a PowerPoint for your class. And also, it's about being able to share the content freely across platforms and not to have to deal with, for example, all those Facebook accounts. So I think we have a number of challenges, but maybe the one that is more kind of immediate is actually to make this integration of XR technology more easy, more flexible for ordinary people, for people maybe who are not that technically savvy, for teachers who are eager to try out new transformative ways of enhancing their teaching, but they don't have the energy or time to kind of deal with all this setup and technology and challenges. They have maybe enough from all those Zoom and Teams and other issues. So we need to really make this technology be kind of an easy part and integrative part of their everyday life and practice.
That's great. Yes, so lowering the barriers to access and creation in order that for more people to be able to use these tools is so that they can use them as tools and bring their expertise to them, and also that cross-platform ease of moving across platforms is really important. I agree with that totally. So I see that we have, oh, that has disappeared now, never mind. So Johanna, would you like to speak to the challenges that we're facing?
Yeah, sure. Something which I'm very concerned about is actually the safety. I can only relate to myself being a woman in a real space and in the virtual space, and both is often really challenging. Because I mean there's so much harassment and things which are not so nice happening. We cannot even make our reality a safe space. It's not even like a simple forum like Reddit isn't even a safe space. Every moment I enter a video game, things are happening which are not nice and which are sort of threatening. So I'm very challenged what having such an experience in virtuality can actually do to us. So something like triggering post-traumatic stress syndrome because someone is touching the virtual breast which feels all of a sudden so real. This is something I'm super concerned about, and social VR spaces I think needs a lot of I don't know, support, backup, more thoughts, and features. Just a small feature which I noticed at Virbela, for instance, is this handshaking. In VR, you don't know what is currently being shaked. If you just look down and there's a hand swooshing. It sounds weird, but that's a really sad reality because there's so many environments which are just not where you don't feel well particularly. And I'm not sure, like I don't think I speak only for women. I think for I can speak for a lot of people here which would just love to have a little bit of a safer and more welcoming environment. So that's something which I am a little bit concerned about because I love VR so much and I see so much potential, but I'm so scared because everyone is currently developing, but not including particular safety features, which make at least our virtual life a little safer in terms of harassment, mobbing, lying, cheating, and so on.
Yes, wow, that is such an important issue and a really challenging one. So I hope that those of you out there who are doing research will turn your minds and your talents to helping address issues of safety. Thank you, Johanna. Julian, how about for you? What do you see as the biggest challenges that we face?
Yeah, I also have ethics and safety as a really high point on my list too. I think, especially with virtual reality, it's such an unconscious experience that, you know, whatever happens to our virtual avatar, our body just feels that, both kind of like physically and emotionally. And this creates a very cool kind of potentials for things such as empathy or being able to experience things through our bodies that we never could experience in the real world, such as having different shapes of bodies or being able to move in different ways or become different things. And so I think as a potential to connect us across the different variety of humans that exist everywhere in the world, I think it's an amazing experience, an amazing potential to be able to basically make these connections across our lived experiences that we normally can't do in the physical world, but with VR, we might be able to do. Also, I think in terms of education, there's something really beautiful about being able to connect the body, for example, to put somebody in a learning experience where you get them to gesture in new ways. And so there's this notion of embodied cognition that has been found that the way people gesture relates to the way they think about the world. And so if we can get someone to gesture in a different way, maybe they'll start thinking about things differently. Or if we can measure people's gestures and create, these technologies basically allow us to measure so many rich data points about the learning experience. So if you can measure things in real time in such a rich way, I think we're going to be able to learn so much more about the way people are thinking in learning experiences and to be able to adapt those experiences. So on one side, I feel this notion of connecting the body through these virtual worlds is really amazing and really powerful. But on the other side, I am also really concerned about these ethical issues and these notions of safety that our bodies just react so strongly to whatever happens to us in these experiences. And so I think we have to be really careful to make sure that if we're a developer making an experience that could be really emotionally triggering or emotionally powerful, we need to make sure that people know what they're kind of signing up for, and they know to have support after the experience is over. I feel like there needs to be some sort of like after VR connection or some sort of support system so that people aren't just left to process these emotions on their own. So related to safety, I think that's one thing. And then the other thing is, I think just in terms of education, I think it would be really great to have more education. One of the issues that I'm seeing right now is that this technology is so technologically difficult to develop for. Like there's a lot of technical know-how that's needed to create these experiences and to understand what can be done with these experiences. And so I think we need to educate people who are coming out of these technical fields. We need to educate them in ethics or to think about these more broader issues of the user experience and how it impacts people outside of the immediate technology experience. So I'm kind of feeling like there's some sort of bias in the population that is developing these experiences. Like there's this designer bias that could be really damaging if we allow it to sort of go unchecked. So I really feel like it's important to have more education, both in terms of ethics of things, but also in terms of how to develop these experiences and how to think about the potential long-term impacts on people.
Yeah, very good point. Really important to integrate things like ethics into technical education in education in very technical fields. Hugely important. Well, I can't believe so much time has gone by because it's been just so fascinating listening to you all, but I do want to ask one more question before we go to Q&A from the audience. So let's call this a lightning round. If you could each take 30 seconds and tell us what you are most excited about in the future of XR. Jessica, let's go and start with you again.
Contextually adaptable assets and environments. Is that 30 seconds?
That is really well within the limit. Thank you. Katerina.
Yeah. Thanks. It's two things. Is one that I'm excited that XR is going to permeate our reality at all levels, like in that hyper reality video. Though I know I think it's going to happen, but at the same time I fear this development. So it's kind of I have mixed feelings about that. And as the previous speakers emphasized, it's important to keep our privacy. But I'm also excited about the ability of XR to give us 100% or 150% immersive and realistic experience, and really give us the possibilities we don't have in reality. Like for myself, I really want to go to outer space. I want to go to other planets, to other stars, and I would never be able to do that in reality. That's something I really hope that XR is going to give me. Though the danger is that it was going to be so exciting for me, they wouldn't be able to drag me back to the more boring real world from such an adventure.
Oh, well, I hope you get to go on that adventure, but we do want you to come back to us. Yes. Johanna, what are you most excited about?
I love sports, and I just want to see more sports in VR. I think we can invent new kind of sports in VR, and I think it would be so fun in the future to use VR and compete in my digital world with real athletes in the real world. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Fantastic. Very cool. Julian.
I'm really excited about connecting to other humans by having experiences that they are having also. So like being able to make these really deeply personal human to human connections by living as other humans or other things. And basically in general, transforming ourselves by having these extremely bodily experiences. Even in learning, I'm really curious to see new learning environments where people are using their bodies to learn about things they never thought about before.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so we have a few minutes left, at least, for some questions from the audience. So there is a raise hand button to the right of your chat window. So if you would like to ask a question, please use that raise hand button, and I will call on you. Anyone? There were a couple of things in the chat here. Let's see if we can address those. Jonathan Richter says, as more tools are available for open content creation, there's more potential to use those tools to create content that is threatening or harmful to others. How do we deal with that seeming paradox? Anyone like to take that on? No takers from the panelists? Okay. All right. So the question of privacy has also come up, and we've addressed here safety more so than privacy. What do you think about privacy and how that figures into XR research and the future of XR?
May I? Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Just very quickly, like, I think privacy, of course, is a really big issue, but I think it can give us also very interesting insights. I mean, we do a lot of data analysis with games, for instance, to improve not only the games itself, but we can learn so many things which are also relevant for our daily lives. And I think this can be in the future also really interesting in terms of VR, but of course, privacy, similar to other ethical aspects, is a huge aspect we should tackle in the future. And I think, as Julian already mentioned before, this goes with privacy and also using ethical learning about ethics in the digital world. I fully agree that this should be taught to in schools. I still cannot understand there is no proper computer or computer science education in schools. This is something which is a little bit frustrating here.
So it's sort of a form of digital literacy, that we understand privacy issues and know how to deal with them.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. Okay, and Jessica, you it looks like you did have something to say about this question. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm learning all about. I mean, I remember being in this virtual space last year, and I don't know. I feel like every time I'm in here, I learn something new. So I think to the point of like representation and privacy, like you know, I've been one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about, I think in terms, and I mentioned in the chat, like fidelity and abstraction of assets. Like if you see it through that lens, like I'm thinking about how, you know, on one side being represented as a high fidelity asset, like, you know, you can see my face as it is, would be maybe important to my mom, but rarely is it really important in any other context, because it's like you really want to close friends, family. Just, I feel like there's something to be said about, you know, the context surrounding or the environment surrounding that person in a virtual space, and how that could morph the like change the information that they're actually delivering to the world. So in terms of privacy, you know, being able to be more of like that smiley face representation in places where you do want to remain private. I know that could work both ways, like for people who are just there, you know, in a peaceful way versus others who may be there to reap havoc or so on. But I think there's There's lots of interesting ways of almost approaching it from like a trust building perspective. Like the more you do something that's considered untrustworthy, which again is a slippery slope, the more your score goes down, et cetera. So I feel like there are ways that we can explore how the environments themselves can help keep the user safe, like ways that we can bake in and leverage data to like an analysis of data in that space to make it a safer space for everybody. I don't know what that is. It's just something that I've been thinking about on the back end of it.
This might be kind of tangential, but I almost feel like, so we're thinking about privacy within these virtual environments, but privacy and trust are sort of like societal issues, right? And so I wonder if we need some sort of education that goes, it's not just about people who are doing these sort of things, but just in basic human schooling, can we teach people about these issues? Because they're going to influence all aspects of their lives, not just their interactions in virtual environments. And so I'm wondering if we can change this issue outside of the virtual environments, that will help with diminishing the kind of issues that happen in virtual environments.
Yeah, that's actually,
I think it's a big problem.
That's a really good point. I mean, not to tangentially go off of you as well, but the idea of, you know, like during the introduction of games, I suppose, and I know there are people on this panel that are much bigger experts on this than myself, but as an amateur enthusiast of this, I feel like, you know, one of the big questions was, are games, you know, making our kids more violent in the real world? And research showed that in fact it did. And if anything, the kids were bringing in manifesting and somehow creating a representation of how the real world made them feel. So if the real world was something that they were angry about or felt diminished by, or you know, a number of negative feelings, they would bring those negative feelings and have them manifest somehow in the gaming world. Hence how they were able to kind of build confidence around their capacity to do something in a world that wasn't accepting of them or just they were in conflict with. So to the point of, you know, like, is there a real world complement to this? I think there has to be. Because I think that the representation of and the taking advantage of privacy and bias and harassment, I think that all comes from the real world. So really trying to make sure that we work in lockstep with the issues that remain in the real world and not ignore them is a big part of this conversation.
Absolutely, yes. Well, we are basically out of time now, but if any of the panelists are burning to put in a last quick comment, please do. Otherwise, I think we will have to move to close. I'm sorry that we can't go on for much longer. I think it's fair to say at this point then that sadly the main event has finished. And if you want to have networking or pictures, and if the panelists are able to stick around for that, please go outside of the main event hall there if the panelists are available. I do want to be respectful of their time. But the live stream will now close, and we would like to again thank our videographers, Tony Cube Studios, and thank the YouTube audience. You can go ahead and